Let us understand the mechanism of muscle imbalance in the lower limb in post-polio residual paralysis and its management. The pathogenesis of polio first. The viruses Lyon, Lansing, and Brunhilde can be weakened and given as oral polio or Sabin vaccine. Being released by the fecal-oral route, they can cause herd immunity. Antibodies against it can also be given as Salk vaccine, and the antibodies are short-lived, but they are injectable and they do not have to have a cold chain. The attenuated live virus in the Sabin vaccine needs a cold chain. Now the virus enters by the oral fecal route, by the contaminated water or vegetables and fruits which have not been cooked, like salad, etc., being taken orally by unwashed hands. And when this reaches the gastrointestinal tract, it grows in the GIT cells. Here, the only symptom may be slight diarrhea, but the virus can be cultured on egg yolk or monkey kidney tissue culture, and even minute traces of virus can be amplified by the polymerase chain reaction, and you may have evidence of a viral infection in the gut. Then the virus reaches the bloodstream and causes an influenza like sickness with fever associated with acute muscle tenderness. And you must not traumatize any muscles by injection, because if you do that, the trauma or injection will aggravate the paralysis. Then, through the blood or the nerve sheath or the axons or the perineural lymphatics, the virus reaches the Antiormone cell, which is a stellate cell with a central nucleus, clear cytoplasm, and Nissls granules. The cell becomes round, cloudy cytoplasm, no Nissls granules, and the nucleus becomes pycnotic and peripheral. Some of these cells will die and some will recover. So, the anti-hands-on cell involvement leads to a pure motor patchy proximal paralysis of the lower limb. Sometimes there can be bulbar polio in the medulla oblongata when the respiratory center may be compromised and the disease may prove fatal. So this pure motor patchy proximal paralysis has an increasing, decreasing and a residual phase. It is associated with acute muscle tenderness and it increases with injury from injection. The difference between the increasing and the decreasing phase is that there is acute muscle tenderness in the increasing phase and not in the decreasing phase. Period wise, the incubation is 2 days, the pre-paralytic phase 2 weeks, the increasing phase 2 months, and the decreasing phase 2 years. After 2 years, there is the residual paralysis. When you face a case of residual paralysis, you have to look at hip contractures, knee contractures, ankle and foot contractures. Then you have to look at power loss and you have to look at limb length discrepancy. So contracture, power loss and limb length discrepancy has to be managed in the residual phase. Now we concentrate on the hip contractures and how to stabilize them. So the hip goes into flexion, abduction, external rotation. The release of contracture is by Sutur's operation, in which you divide the tensor fascia lata, the deep fascia laterally to correct abduction and anteriorly to correct flexion. The sartorius where you have to save the lateral cutaneous nerve of thigh, the straight head of rectus femoris, where you have to save the lateral circumflex femoral artery. Now, if this fails, you erase the iliacus and the gluteus from the inner and outer surface of the ilium. You slide down these muscles by extending the limb, and you remove the extruded ilium in an adult, or do remove a part of it below the iliac apophysis so that you can reposition the iliac apophysis and stitch back the muscles over it. So if you want to stabilize or restore extension, you have to transfer to gluteus maximus, the iliopsoas, through a hole or a notch in the ilium. Alternative to iliopsoas, you may be able to use the latissimus dorsi or the quadratus lumborum, which are synphasic transfers to gluteus maximus. So here is the suture's operation. I'll describe it for you. An incision is made on the iliac crest to the anterior spine and then down 4 centimeters on the anterolateral aspect of the thigh in the gap between the tensor fascia lata and the sartorius. The deep fascia is divided parallel to the incision in the sartorius tensor fascia lata space. Then the deep fascia is divided parallel to the inguinal ligament up to the lateral saphenous opening to correct the flexion, and the deep fascia and the tensor fascia lata is divided transversely, not up to but across the intermuscular septum, so that you are sure that the iliotibial band is divided. Under the deep fascia, you divide the sartorius, saving the lateral cutaneous nerve of thigh, and then you divide the straight head of rectus femoris, saving the lateral circumflex femoral artery. If the contracture is not corrected, you erase the gluteus from the outer surface of the ilium and iliacus from its inner surface, and then you extend the hip. These muscles will slide down and a portion of the ilium will jut out of the muscular gap. You can excise it in adults or in children. You can resect a piece of bone below the iliac apophysis and reposit the iliac apophysis so that you can stitch the gluteus to the iliacus above the iliac apophysis. This operation is called as Campbell's operation or Campbell's modification of Suture's operation. In the knee contracture, you have the Yount's operation, in which 1 inch of the iliotibial band and the lateral intramuscular septum is resected. If this fails, you do a posterior release operation where you divide the popliteal deep fascia transversely right across the popliteal fossa. Then you divide the biceps tendon, saving the lateral popliteal nerve. You divide the two head of the gastrocnemius, the semimembranosus and semitendinosus, and finally you divide the posterior capsule of the knee. Then you concentrate on the lateral popliteal nerve and prevent stretching the artery and the nerve when you are trying to correct the contracture. So if you feel that the nerve is too tight, then you can do a closed wedge supracondylar osteotomy of the lower femur. When you do this, sometimes you find that the tibia would slide posteriorly, so in relation to the femoral condyle. This is called as posterior subluxation. Then you have to divide through a anteromedial incision parallel to the ligamentum patelli, the anterior cruciate ligament, and this operation is called as Somerville operation, and you have to pull the tibia forward by either a Hamilton Russell traction or a skeletal traction through a tibial tuberosity. Now, if you want to stabilize, then you have to transfer the semitendinosus, the semimembranosus, and the biceps femoris to the quadriceps. We'll show you this release diagrammatically in the next slide, and here it is. So the green line shows the lateral intermuscular septum extending from the lateral lip of the linea aspera of the femur to the iliotibial band. The iliotibial band is connected by the deep fascia anteriorly and posteriorly, and then you see superficially the subcutaneous tissue, and through the skin and subcutaneous tissue you make an incision. You incise the deep fascia about 3 to 4 inches above the lateral condyle of femur. You excise the deep fascia anterior to the iliotibial band and posterior to the iliotibial band. From the anterior gap, you remove the vastus lateralis from the anterior surface of the lateral intermuscular septum right up to the linea aspera, and from the inferior gap in the deep fascia below the iliotibial band, you remove the biceps and the lateral popliteal nerve right up to the lateral lip of linea aspera. Then you hold the iliotibial band and the separated lateral intermuscular septum right up to the tip of the right up to the lip of the lateral lip of the linea aspera, and you divide 1 inch of it. This is the Yount's operation. Now, supposing you fail to correct the flexion contracture, then you divide the deep fascia, posterior deep fascia, across the popliteal fossa transversely. And as you do it, you will expose the biceps femoris on the lateral side. You hook the biceps femoris and divide the biceps femoris, saving the lateral popliteal nerve. Then across the popliteal fossa, you hook the semimembranosus and semitendinosus, and you divide those muscles. Across the popliteal artery and the posterior tibial nerve. Then you divide from the supracondylar ridge the lateral and the medial head of the gastrocnemius, and you do a posterior capsulotomy. Now this is the soft tissue release for flexion contracture of the knee, and when you start extending the knee, you feel for the lateral popliteal nerve. If you feel that in the extension the lateral popliteal nerve is tight, then you do a bone shortening operation, which is an anterior close wedge supracondylar osteotomy. When you do this, you may find that because of a contracted anterior cruciate ligament, the tibia slides posteriorly in relation to the femoral condyle. This posterior subluxation can be corrected by dividing the anterior cruciate ligament and pulling the tibia forward by a skeletal traction through the tibial tuberosity or a Hamilton-Russell traction supporting the upper calf. This operation is called as the Somerville operation. Now we have corrected the knee joint contracture, and we are left with quadriceps weakness. So let us now start studying the effects of the quadriceps weakness, the normal functioning and the effects of the quadriceps weakness. Normally you find that as the femur extends completely, the tie rope action of the anterior cruciate ligament causes it to internally rotate over the weight bearing tibia. Now this rotation alters the flexion extension axis of the knee, which is passing through the femoral condyles. So unless and until you reverse this rotation by the action of popliteus, which derotates the femur. This rotation will not allow the knee to flex even though the quadriceps is relaxing. This process is called as locking of the knee, and because the knee cannot flex because of the locking, even though the quadriceps is relaxed, this is an energy saving mechanism. Now, if there is absence of active or passive terminal extension, as in flexion contracture of the knee or quadriceps weakness, then this will prevent locking. And then the knee may flex in weight bearing, which is called as the buckling of the knee. Now, absence of active or passive terminal extension in flexion contracture or quadriceps weakness would thus prevent locking. And here the knee will flex in weight bearing, which is the buckling of the knee. And this can be compensated by the axis of the knee being pushed backwards, as in genu recurvatum, or the line of gravity which extends from the head of the femur to the weight bearing portion of the foot anteriorly by either extending the hip or plantar flexing the ankle. We'll see how this happens in the next slide. Now you see that the line of gravity extends from the center of the head of the femur to the weight bearing portion of the foot. So if there is equinus and the metatarsal heads are bearing the weight, then the line of gravity will be pushed forward. If the gluteus maximus contracts, the trochanter will be pushed forward and the line of gravity will be again pushed forward in relation to the axis of the knee. So the gluteus maximus and the gastrocnemius will prevent buckling. The third mechanism can be that the knee axis is pushed behind, as in case of genu recurvatum. Then also the knee will remain stable and will not buckle in the weight bearing portion, in the weight bearing phase or the stance phase of the lower limb. Now, when these three mechanisms cannot compensate the quadriceps weakness, then the knee will buckle in the weight bearing phase of the limb, and therefore what will happen is this. The trunk will bend forward so that it will push the line of gravity forward. Secondly, the person will use his hand to push the knee backward or the axis backward. This gait is called as the quadriceps gait. And when this happens, then you have to substitute quadriceps power by the semimembranosus or the semitendinosus and the biceps femoris being transferred to the quadriceps. Alternatively, you may have to stabilize the knee by giving a low calf band, a high calf band, a low thigh band, and a patellar strap in a brace, which is also called as the knee cage. So, tendon transfer or an orthotic device has to be given if there is a quadriceps gait. And of course, all these tendons must be transferred after you have corrected the flexion contracture of the knee. Then we move on to the equinus. Equinus will be converted into foot drop if you correct the equinus by a tendo-Achilles Z-plasty, resection of the plantaris, posterior capsulotomy, and To accommodate the widened talus, you may have to divide the tibiofibular ligament and widen the ankle mortise. Alternatively, in adults, equinocavovarus deformities are corrected by triple arthrodesis, which is the Lambrinudis triple arthrodesis. So after you have corrected the contracture, or if there is no contracture around the ankle and the subtiloid joint, then you will correct the foot drop, which is presenting as a high steppage gait or toe to toe gait, by tendon transfer, bone block, or fusion. The tendon transfers are extensor hallucis longus and extensor digitorum longus. The EHL transfer is to the neck of the first metacarpal with the interphalangeal joint fusion, called the modified Jones operation. The EDL proximal transfer of the extensor digitorum longus is the Hibbs operation. And then if there is a valgus, you may transfer the peroneus longus to the tibialis anterior or the neck of talus, which is the Osmond-Clark operation. And if there is a varus, that means the tibialis posterior is more powerful, you can transfer it to the dorsum of the foot, either circumtibially or through the interosseous membrane. Now then you may do a posterior bone block. See how the dicky type opening of the posterior part of the body of the talus supported by a bone graft can prevent foot drop. This is called as the talar block, or you can use the upper surface of the posterior part of the calcaneum to create a bone block. So that is the calcaneal bone block. Lambrinudis triple arthrodesis is also a bone block operation for the ankle. If the ankle is painful or the ligaments around the ankle are lax, in that circumstance, you may have to remove the body of the talus and do what is called as the Blair's fusion by sliding an anterior tibial cortical graft behind the remaining portion of the talus after removing the body. So the Lambrinudis triple arthrodesis means lower surface of the talus is cut perpendicular to the axis of the leg. The upper surface of the calcaneum is cut parallel to the sole, and when you close the wedge, you find that with talus in complete plantar flexion, the sole lies perpendicular to the leg. So this is Lambrinudis triple arthrodesis. Now, here this diagram shows you how to correct equinus: tendoachilles Z-plasty, plantaris resection, posterior capsulotomy, and talofibular ligament divided to accommodate a widened body of talus. Then how to substitute dorsiflexors, extensor hallucis longus or extensor digitorum longus in the modified Jones or Hibbs operation respectively, a tibialis posterior transfer in equinovarus, and posterior peroneus longus transfer in equinovalgus. So this is equinus and foot drop. Then we go on to calcaneus. In calcaneus, you have to restore the tendoachilles. If there is valgus, you use the peroneus longus translocation, which is called as the Bickel-Moe operation. If there is associated varus, you have to transfer the tibialis anterior to the tendoachilles. And when you do it, since the tibialis anterior is an important muscle, very important muscle, you have to substitute the tibialis anterior by transferring the extensor hallucis longus to the neck of the first metatarsal and fusing the interphalangeal joint, which is the modified Jones component of this operation. So tibialis anterior to tendoachilles plus modified Jones operation is called as P-body transfer. Then if the tibialis posterior is strong as in varus, then you transfer the tibialis posterior to tendoachilles. Lastly, if none of these are available, then you coronally section the tendoachilles, rotate it upwards, and use the hamstrings to give power to the tendoachilles. Supposing there is no tendon available, then you do an anterior bone block by sliding an anterior cortical tibial graft downwards, trying to block the neck of the talus to go into dorsiflexion, or you can do a reverse Lambrinides triple arthrodesis. If multiple joints are involved, then you can stabilize by a caliper which has got an anterior check. Now you remember that AC is anterior check and anterior check is given for calcaneus. Remember it by AC, anterior check for calcaneus. Then in the subtalar joint, the contracture is varus. So you see this diagram carefully. First you will divide the skin, then the flexor retinaculum near the medial malleolus to save the posterior calcaneal branches of the posterior tibial nerve which are piercing the flexor retinaculum and supplying the skin. Then you lengthen, transfer or resect the tibialis posterior. You lengthen the flexor hallucis longus and flexor digitorum longus. You save the nerve. You recognize the artery by its veni conjunctis, the rail track effect, because the artery is not pulsatile when the tourniquet is tied. Then you divide the tibiocalcaneal part of the deltoid ligament, not the tibiotalar, otherwise you will produce instability. Then you divide the medial half of the interosseous talocalcaneal ligament. If the bone, the calcaneum bone is inverted, then you do a medial open wedge calcaneal osteotomy, which is called as the MOCO. So this is the operation which you do to correct the varus at the subtaloid joint. Then supposing you are trying to restore the inverter weakness. So you use a peroneus longus to the neck of the first metatarsal or the tibialis anterior, and you always combine it with a tibial cortical graft in the lateral part of the sinus tarsi. So the peroneus longus to tibialis anterior transfer is Osman-Clark operation component, and a graft in the sinus tarsi from the lateral side is the Grice and Green operation. Alternative to the graft, you can put a fibular graft through the neck of talus into the calcaneum, which is called as the Bachelor's operation. Then we go on to the cavus. Cavus means increased medial arch, which means a decreased hindfoot forefoot angle. It can occur with equinus and calcaneus or even without them. You would find that this has happened because the middle part of the arch is being pulled up by the peroneus longus tibialis anterior hook, or the bowstring structures extending from calcaneum to the forefoot are contracted. So to decrease the arch by soft tissue operations, you have to release and weaken the bowstrings, which is either by a Stendler's operation or by a neurectomy, which is called as the Garcio-Braham's neurectomy. In the Stendler's operation, you divide everything that arises from the medial calcaneal tuberosity, which includes the plantar epineuritis and muscles of the first layer of sole. The muscles of the first layer of sole is the flexor between two abductors, the flexor digitorum brevis between abductor hallucis and abductor digiti minimi. Then you can release the peroneus longus tibialis anterior hook by transferring the peroneus longus to the peroneus brevis, which is the Betson's operation. Then you can do bony operations to reshape the bones by a dorsal close wedge mid-tarsal osteotomy, which is called by the Japa's osteotomy, or a plantar open wedge V-tarsectomy. Now, in adults, you have to do a triple arthrodesis, which corrects the cavus at the talonavicular and calcaneocuboid joints. Now the reverse of cavus, the planus. The planus is the problem when the spring ligament fails. Now the spring ligament you would find is connecting the sustentaculum tali to the navicular below the head of the talus. Now if this ligament fails, the head of the talus will herniate between the sustentaculum tali and the navicular and will sublux at the subtaloid joint so that the talus will become vertical. You would find that the medial arch would become convex instead of concave, and this is called as the rocker bottom foot. The hind foot has gone into equinus, leading to equinus contractures, and the forefoot has gone into calcaneus or dorsiflexion, leading to dorsiflexor contractures. So the first step at correction is correct the equinus contracture and the dorsiflexion contracture. The second step is restore the talonavicular articulation and the talocalcaneal articulation. Then stabilize it by passing a wire, K-wire, through the head of the metatarsal into the cuneiform, into the navicular and into the talus. Then you have to restore the spring ligament by taking the tibialis posterior, which is inserted onto the navicular, removing the medial tubercle of the navicular and transferring it inferolaterally to its lower surface so that now the tibialis posterior supports the spring ligament. The next thing you can do is you can transfer the peroneus longus to the neck of the talus, which is the Osmond-Clark operation, and you can combine it with a trapezoid anterior tibial cortical graft into the lateral part of the sinus tarsi, which is the Grice and Green component of the Osmond-Clark operation. So this is what you can do for a vertical talus. Then the tibialis anterior weakness, and see the effect of the tibialis anterior weakness on the toes. So here you see that the tibialis anterior is weak. Therefore, the extensor hallucis longus and the extensor digitorum longus are trying to dorsiflex the ankle in the swing phase. So now, as instead of dorsiflexing the forefoot, they are hyperextending the metacarpophalangeal joint, and this, by their bowstring action, is actually increasing the cavus. So you help the extensor hallucis longus by transferring it from the dorsum of the phalanx of the great toe into the neck of the first metatarsal. Of course, you have to fuse the interphalangeal joint because there is no opposition to flexor hallucis longus now. This is called as the modified Jones operation. You do the same thing to the extensor digitorum longus, and that is called as the Hibbs operation. Now we are seeing the cavus and the calcaneus, not in the equina, but uh, in the calcaneus problem. In the calcaneus, you find that the hind foot has become vertical because the tendo-Achilles is weak. To keep the metatarsals on the ground, the forefoot has dropped, the bowstring structures are tight, and because the MP joint has gone into hyperextension, the extensor hallucis longus is contracted, and there's a tenodizing effect on the flexor hallucis longus, which is flexing the interphalangeal joint. So you remove the extensor hallucis longus and transfer it to the flexor hallucis longus so that MP hyperextension is taken care of and the flexor hallucis longus is able to uh, allow the interphalangeal joint to extend. This operation EHL to F flexor hallucis longus is called as the Dixon-Devolay operation. Now, if the same clawing occurs in the little toes, then you see that the flexor digitorum profundus tendon gives a muscle which is the lumbrical to the extensor expansion in the toes. Now this muscle flexes the MP joint and extends the PIP and DIP. This muscle has failed. Therefore, there is hyperextension at the metatarsophalangeal joints and flexion at the PIP and DIP joint, which is called as clawing. So you have to restore the lumbricals by taking the flexor digitorum brevis tendon and transferring it through the lumbrical tunnel into the extensor expansion. Alternatively, if you don't have this muscle or tendon, then you can fuse the interphalangeal joints, which is called as the Lambranudi operation. For the toe valgus or varus, you always bother about the great toe only. You have to release the contracted, you have to strengthen the stretched by doing a resection capsuloplasty or transferring a tendon. So this is how you deal with toe valgus or varus. So if then there is multiple joint defects or multiple deformities, after correcting the contractures, you can give a brace. In the hip, the pelvic belt stabilizes the rotation and the ischial weight bearing can take off the weight to treat an unstable or painful weight bearing in the hip. The hip lock will stabilize the hip inflection and extension. In the knee, a low thigh band and a high calf band with patellar strap will provide a 3-point fixation and will substitute for quadriceps weakness and prevent buckling. In the ankle, a foot drop needs a below knee caliper with posterior check, a toe raising appliance or a foot ankle orthosis, and a calcaneus needs a below knee caliper with anterior check. If there is a subtalar joint varus, you need an inside iron to push the calcaneum out and an outside T-strap to pull it out. So inside iron, outside T-strap for varus and outside iron, inside T-strap for valgus. In the midfoot cavus, you need a metatarsal bar. In the midfoot planus, you need a medial heel wedge raise to invert the hindfoot with a TCE heel to evert the forefoot in less than 5 years old. So a medial heel wedge raise with a TCE heel will cause restoration of the cavus, the medial arch. If there is above 5 years of age, then you have to support the arch by a valgoid insole. If there is clawing of the 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, you need a metatarsal bar to prevent hyperextension of the metatarsophalangeal joints. With the big toe valgus ovaris, you need an appropriate figure of 8 Velcro strap. So to revise, a flexion, abduction, external rotation of hip needs a Sutur's and a Campbell's operation. A knee flexion needs a Yount's operation, which can be extended in a posterior release operation, which was devised and described by Willis. Then this can be combined with a Somerville operation. And if you find the posterior structures are stretching too much, you may do a supracondylar osteotomy, close wedge osteotomy of the lower femur to shorten the bone rather than stretch the soft tissue. With the ankle equinus, you do a Z-plasty, a plantaris dissection, a posterior capsulotomy. You may have to divide the tibiofibular ligament to accommodate a wide anterior body of the talus, or you may do a Lambrinudis triple arthrodesis. For a foot drop, you have to use the extensor hallucis longus with IP fusion, modified Jones. You can use a extensor digitorum longus to the dorsum of foot, which is the Hibbs operation. You can use peroneus longus and equinovalgus, which is Osman Clark, and tibialis posterior to the dorsum and equinovarus. You can do a posterior bone block, or you can fusion. You can do fuse the ankle if the ankle is painful or unstable. In the calcaneus, you usually have no contracture, so you have to only restore power. In the subtaloid joint varus, remember dividing the skin, subcutaneous tissue, flexor retinaculum. The doctors are not here. That means the tibialis posterior, the flexor hallucis longus, the flexor digitorum longus, and saving the artery and the nerve. Then you divide the tibiocalcaneal part of the deltoid ligament, not the tibiotalar part, and the medial half of the intraosseous talocalcaneal ligament. You have to save the posterior tibial artery and the nerve and the posterior calcaneal branches of the nerve. And the deep part of the tibiocalcaneal ligament, the tibiotalar part of the tibiocalcaneal ligament. Now if you feel that the heel is inverted, then you do a medial open wedge calcaneal osteotomy. Then for the midfoot cavus, you deal with the bowstring, Stindler's operation or Garcia-Braham's operation. You deal with the hook by transferring the peroneus longus to brevis. Then you can also supinate the forefoot, which is either done by transferring the extensor hallucis longus from inferomedial to superolateral side of the first metatarsal. That will rotate the first metatarsal into supination. Or you can do a cuneiform osteotomy and derotate or supinate the first metatarsal. So this operation is called as McElvany-Caldwell operation. Okay, so this is how you deal with the midfoot cavus. And then you have to look after vertical talus, where you release the equinus, release of the hind foot, release the dorsiflexion of the forefoot, realign the talonavicular and the subtaloid articulations, stabilize them by passing a K-wire through the head of the metatarsal into the cuneiform and into the navicular and the talus, and then reconstruct the string ligament using by inferiorly transferring the tibialis posterior or Pull the neck of the talus up by using the peroneus longus. Transfer to the neck of the talus, combining it with the subtaloid extraarticular arthrodesis. For the clawing of the rest of the toes, you either use a flexor digitorum superficialis uh, through the lumbrical canal into the extensor expansion, which is called as the girdle stone Taylor's operation, or you fuse the interphalangeal joint, which is called as the Lambron-Nudi operation. For big toe caulking, in equinus, the metacarpophalangeal is in hyperextension in swing phase, and with foot drop, you use the extensor hallucis longus to the neck of the first metatarsal, which is the modified Jones operation. If there is calcaneus and caulking, you transfer the extensor hallucis longus to the flexor hallucis longus, which is the Dixon-Devolay operation. Then you restore length by a shoe race, by block measurement. Never restore it fully so that there is easy toe clearance in the swing phase of the leg. Then you can lengthen the bones by Ilizarov-based distraction osteosynthesis in the thigh or the leg, making sure that the knees stay at the same level in both limbs during weight bearing.